Hello and welcome. It's Jen with Aging Advantage. So today we're going to be doing our second part of our series on post-caregiver identity. And this is, like I said, in the first one, this is just such an important topic that I don't think it's talked about. And, you know, it's just something that I think so many people go through and so many people struggle with, especially again when they have poured their for some people, like their whole lives into caregiving for somebody. Maybe it was a child that was disabled, or maybe it was like it's a family member or a parent or something as they've continued to age. And sometimes, again, it can be a short-term thing for some people. Sometimes these caregiving duties and responsibilities can be over years and years and years and years and years. And people then, can tend to absolutely like lose themselves, and they, lose their own identity in this process. And it can be, just really disorientating, almost like hollow and yet terrifying sometimes for people when they all of a sudden, the person that they're caregiving for either like passes, unfortunately, or maybe they move on to like an assisted living or a memory care space. Maybe they move to, like I said, another sibling's house, or they move to a different house, or sometimes their health improves and they get better. And then the person's not needed at all anymore that way. So there's a lot of different dynamics of how, someone can get past the caregiver role into kind of this, like for themselves, we'll call it like the afterlife of caregiving, scenario. But one of the things we're going to be talking about today that's really cool is, again, like, yes, we recognize that these things, are occurring, right? We in the last, step one presentation, we kind of looked at like, how do we know if we're experiencing this? How do we know also too, how do we recognize ahead of time if we're going to be experiencing this so that we can set ourselves up for success, as we continue to process through these things. But today, what we're going to be talking about is, not, we already recognized it, but now, like, okay, great, but like, what do we do about it? How do we find a way to move forward? What are some strategies to help us rebuild and renew our own life? How do we discover, as post caregivers, if you will, like personal passions that we have, like hobbies that we might be interested in? And how also do we connect to maybe like support groups and other peer groups to help us kind of navigate and heal as we, try to rebuild and get used to our newfound freedom that we have as well. That again, for some people, like that unstructure, that being unneeded, and not having some kind of like semblance of, like focus anymore in their day and in their activities, again, can just be like, oh, like just too much for some people. They're not used to having that. So, kind of, how do we package all that together and make that transition feel successful and make it feel like purposeful and help that caregiver post caregiving stay connected to that new version of themselves in a happy, joyful, fulfilled kind of a way? So that is what we're going to be talking about in this second and last part here. And again, Jen with Aging Advantage. So we are a nonprofit here in the St. Louis area, and we help to support people with, housing insecurity issues, food insecurities, isolation issues, and again, helping you all just be more resilient, reliant on yourselves, self-reliant, and also like confident in navigating some of these different health challenges, and also, moving forward with some of these different things that we all face as we are, just supporting people and loved ones, family, friends, etc., in our lives as maybe they age, maybe they might be a disabled persons, or also, if we ourselves are that, that person as well, that people are caregiving for us or like helping us, or we're going to be needing help at some point, in the future, like just navigating just all these different topics and also helping get you guys connected to all these incredible resources that are available to you as you navigate some of these, different challenges in life. So again, please, please, please share this with someone that you know. And again, that person might be completely outside of the St. Louis area, but that's perfect. Still share that with them because so many people need this information and need to know that they're loved and they're cared for and someone is seeing them and hearing them and being supportive for them as they are on this backside of, this caregiving journey, because it is rough, it can be really hard for people. So again, definitely follow us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube, and make sure, that also if you have had incredible experiences and things that you found successful as you've navigated this journey, potentially yourself, or you watched someone close to you navigate the journey, please share it in the comments so that we can all continue to build this incredible, beautiful community with one another and just support all of us on our journey. So, as always, sit back, relax, get cozy, and grab what you're drinking. And let's get started, guys. Okay, so today we're going to start with, again, like I said last time, the slightly scary premise of focusing on ourselves, right? And for some people, again, it's great. For other people, this is a completely terrifying premise because they have focused so much of their time and energy and effort on the person they're caregiving for. They have no idea what they like to do anymore, or meaningful things that they would enjoy, etc. So we're going to talk about how do we get some strategies for paths forward, because they are real, meaningful things that you can do to support your own healing and reconstruction, if you want to think about it that way, also during this time. And I want to frame all of these as intentions and invitations, also, rather than kind of prescriptions. So there's no timelines. Please know that. There's no right way to do this. These are just some suggestions that have helped many former caregivers find their own footing again as they've navigated through all this. So, first thing would be to rediscover personal passions. And this one sounds simple. I get that. But it is also one of the most profound things that you can do, but can also be one of the scariest things for people to do because, again, think about this. Like, what did you love before caregiving fully consumed a lot of your attention? Some of those things might not even pertain to you now. Now you might be in a different season of life. You might be in, different health yourself. You might have different abilities now than you had then. So you might need to reinvent some different ideas potentially in this category. You might need to look at that. You have to think about also, just overall again, but what did you like to do? What activities also brought you joy? Maybe, you lost track of time doing that activity, or maybe it even gave you a sense of flow or, peace or aliveness. Maybe it was a hobby that you set aside, possibly even like a creative pursuit that you gave up. Maybe like you were going to write a book or try to do painting or, different things like that. Or maybe learn to play the guitar or something that you just totally gave up on. And It can be, also maybe like a form of movement that you loved. So even if it's just going for walks, or if it potentially, was like maybe you did like a little yoga class before or something. Maybe, you did archery or some or whatever it might have been. But also in this kind of category too, I want you to think about, and write some of these things down, guys, while we're going through it. But maybe it was like a place that you used to go, that you like to visit, that you like to hang out in. That just kind of, again, helped you stay grounded and brought smile to your face and kind of brought you joy. So for some people, returning to old passions feels, immediately natural and joyful. But for others, like those old interests feel strangely like flat or inaccessible at first. And that's okay too. Sometimes you have to approach them with patience and give yourself permission to just try without any pressure to feel something right away. The aliveness, comes back usually eventually. And sometimes it just takes a little time to kind of warm that up again. And for some other former caregivers, the question really becomes less about returning to old passions and, like I was saying earlier, more about like just discovering new ones. Maybe you have new interests that emerged from or were shaped by the caregiving experience or by the person that you ended up getting close to while you were caregiving. Simply new circumstances and sometimes even curiosities that deserve, to be explored. There's something beautiful about reaching a stage in life where you have more freedom also to follow your curiosity wherever that's going to lead. Here in St. Louis, we have so many incredible resources for helping to rediscover some of these things and just try them out. Try on different activities and interests and pursuing different things. We have art classes, we have cultural programs, for example, even like at the St. Louis Art Museum. We have the Missouri Botanical Gardens that is absolutely beautiful. And we have a lot of extensive programming as well through our St. Louis County and St. Louis City senior centers. We also have a lot of community educational opportunities through local libraries and even community colleges, etc. So there's a lot of different ways. We have an incredible zoo here in St. Louis with an incredible science center and even like planetarium, etc. We have places that are even really neat, like Third Degree Glass Factory, where you can go do blown glass. We have, like in St. Charles, for example, there's like the Foundry Art Center there, where they have all kinds of different like oil and acrylics and watercolor classes, sculpture classes. There's just so many different things, so many different things and all kinds of other mediums like glass, like stained glass. There's just so many things to do in St. Louis and around our whole entire area. So there's really, something for everyone if you start, digging and looking. And another thing too is you can absolutely like volunteer. You can become like a docent at any of these places as well. If there's something that you love or that you find, really, really meaningful as well that you can kind of get into. So the next thing is going to be to seek support and find like, peer groups. So just know that you don't have to navigate this transition alone at all. One of the most healing things a former caregiver can do is to connect with others who have actually had the same experience. So the validation of hearing someone say, yes, I felt that too. The recognition that your disorientation and grief and relief also, and uncertainty that you're also feeling now on the other side of it, are normal, shared human experiences. This can be enormously powerful for you to experience. Caregiver support groups, including support groups for former caregivers, exist in our community and nationally. We have a lot of incredible organizations. We partner with a lot of them here at Aging Advantage, but there are so many resources and incredible groups. And it's like nationwide, but we have so many of them based right here in our area, in the St. Louis area. We are really, truly blessed, guys. So example, like the Alzheimer's Association, for example, like offers support groups that welcome people who have recently lost a caregiving role, as well as those currently caregiving. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, offers support programs that can be helpful for the grief and depression that sometimes can follow caregiving. And there are, specific therapists and counselors too, and social workers who specialize in grief and life transitions and who have specific experience working with former caregivers. And again, here in St. Louis, the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging, and us here, at Aging Advantage as well, can help connect you with caregiving resources in your area specifically. So if you especially are experiencing significant depression or grief that is interfering with your daily life, please reach out, to your primary care provider to start with, or if you have a counselor or, a psychiatrist or even like a social worker, but, definitely please reach out to one of them because, what you're going through is real and it has a name and it's treatable and there are, paths forward for sure. Another thing that is going to be super, super important that a lot of people don't really think about. Like some people, people would think about, yes, the first one, rediscover personal passions. And then, maybe the second one, maybe, seek support in peer groups. But this one, I think, is a fascinating one that a lot of people don't really intentionally and purposefully try to necessarily piece these puzzle pieces together. And this is so key. And if you're kind of lost and you're not sure where to begin, I would absolutely encourage you guys to just start here. So we talked earlier about how caregiving, so establishing new routines and goals, okay? And we talked earlier about how caregiving creates structure, right? And how the loss of that structure can feel really disorientating and almost kind of leave you like blank and like lost kind of feeling. And one of the most practical and healing things you can do to begin to rebuild your life is really to rebuild that new structure. So one that is organized around your needs, your wants, your rhythms of how you kind of, want your day to flow and go, and how you want your weeks, or your month, etc. to go. Your values as well, things that you would like to do or you don't want to do. Like an example of this might even be like, let's say, I'm just going to throw this in quick. Like, let's say the person you were always caregiving for, watch TV every single night for like 4 hours. And maybe prior to that, like you never watched TV, ever. That wasn't something that you ever did. So again, like your values would be different. Let's say also example, maybe the person you were caregiving for was like a huge sports person. Okay. So they watched, here in St. Louis, we have the Cardinals. For our baseball team, we have the Blues, also for our hockey team, we have the Battlehawks for, our indoor football, etc. But we have the Ambush, our little, our soccer team, etc. But we have a lot of like really great teams. We have St. Louis City also for our, outdoor soccer. And, we have a lot of just incredible different sports teams here in St. Louis. So maybe like the person you were caregiving for was like a huge sports buff. Maybe you never cared ever to watch anything sports related on TV, in person, none of it whatsoever, before caregiving for that person. So same thing again, like that could be, just like a quick little expand your horizons on this whole values kind of concept. But again, things that you like versus their likes kind of. But, maybe, and again, you're going to have to create this structure based now on your all of these things rather than the demands of the person you were, or the needs, wants, desires of the person you were caregiving for, and the demands also of that actual caregiving role. And this doesn't have to be complicated. So start small. So, like, again, if you don't know where to start, this is where we're going to start. So write these things down. This is a get your pen out moment. So what we're going to do, start small. We're going to choose a consistent time to wake up and go to bed. We're going to build a morning routine that is also entirely your own now. So think about whatever you would want that to look like for you. And, also I want you to kind of add a regular commitment each week. So maybe that's going to be a class that you actually get out of the house and you go to. Maybe that's going to be going for a walk or going for a walk, like with a friend. Maybe that could be a volunteer shift. That could be maybe going to lunch with a friend, going to, church or something like that. But something that gives your week an anchor. And, bonus points, if you can kind of schedule something like one of these things, a couple of times a week, eventually you might get to scheduling one of these things like every day, at least. But again, start slow and just let the new routine kind of organically grow from there. And I did a really, really cool series, education series workshop for you guys too, on sleep hygiene. And super fascinating, incredible information. So I would urge you to go back and watch that one if you haven't seen that one yet. But that will go into some of this a little bit more, and it's really fascinating. Again, about like your setting your wake time and your sleep time and just all the things, but really, really cool information. All the things that also getting important, like deep sleep, all the ways that it actually helps to, support your brain health and decreasing dementia and helping your body detox and just all the things that it actually does, which is pretty fascinating. So, yes, I guess like public service announcement, go watch that one. Again, sleep hygiene, if you haven't watched that one yet, but you'll understand why this piece, this whole sleep thing is like super important and super anchoring to help you, again, start to kind of just get it together. Another thing is, again, going to be setting small, meaningful goals. And this can help enormously with the sense of purposelessness that former caregivers experience. Again, these do not have to be big, overwhelming, huge life goals. They can just be gentle, achievable intentions, like learning to cook a couple new recipes, maybe a new kind of cuisine from a new culture, reading a certain number of books, can be walking a certain number of steps or a certain time of walking, per day, but, reconnecting with an old friend. So, or family or something like that. But small goals create small victories, and small victories can really help to rebuild a sense of agency and also direction. The last thing on here too is going to be embracing self-care and healing. And this is perhaps the most important, message of all. But again, a lot of these other things are, going to be kind of action items, but this embracing self-care and healing, again, is kind of that like mental and emotional shift that you're going to be making as you are, going through some of these other steps. And as you kind of mentally shift here, you're going to be starting to also then put in place some of these like physical things to support this category. So this is, one of the ones that former caregivers often find the hardest when they just pause and stop. And again, in the quiet moments when there's nothing happening, this is the one that people tend to have the hardest time receiving. It's time to actually take care of yourself. And again, for a lot of people, that's terrifying. As weird as that sounds, it is. It's terrifying because now, like we talked about in the first one of the hardest things for people to sometimes hear is, focus on yourself. Just keep the focus on yourself now. But again, since we've been a caregiver for so long, we seemingly, like legitimately, like don't know how to do that from a mental, emotional, physical standpoint without that feeling of guilt, that can creep in, or shame, etc. Or again, like feeling like we're being neglectful or something. So, but it is like, this is the time now that you have to take care of yourself. So not just in addition to caring for others, like it's not a luxury or an afterthought. Like it's a central and primary work now that you have to do as this season of your life progresses. So for many caregivers, the habit of putting themselves last has been just so deeply ingrained that self-care feels foreign again or super selfish. And I want to just gently and firmly push back on that for all of you. Self-care is not selfish. It's how you restore yourself after a long season of giving. It's how you make sure that you arrive at the next chapter of your life with enough left in the tank for you to be able to fully show up for yourself, your life, and your goals, like what you wanted and how you wanted your life to look and how you wanted your life to go. So self-care looks different for everyone. For some, it means prioritizing sleep and physical health that got neglected during caregiving. For some, it means time alone in nature or doing creative pursuits or in just quiet reflection. For some, it means finally addressing their own medical needs that were deferred while attempting to help support, and providing attention to someone else's. For other people at this stage now, this is going to mean addressing, grief, support, or therapy that maybe they've been postponing for a really long time. For some, also, it means just giving themselves permission to have genuine rest for once. And whatever it looks like for you, just know you deserve it. And in this season, this is difficult and it's disorientating. And it can be, like I said, scary. And it's definitely for a lot of people like venturing into the land of the unknown, but ultimately transforming this season of your life of post-caregiver identity is when you most need to give this time, in transformation to yourself. So again, when we look forward ahead, we're going to try to look forward ahead here with hope. And just know, again, your journey continues from here. Your post-caregiver identity is not an ending. Like it's just a threshold that you're going to walk right through. And like all thresholds, it's both a loss and also it's a beautiful beginning because both of those things are going to be true at the same time, even when it seems impossible. And I think this slide, offers us something simple and beautiful. Post-caregiver identity is a journey. Again, not an endpoint. And I think that's exactly right. There is, no moment when you just all of a sudden, right now, this second, realize suddenly, oh, I have this all figured out again. Like I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I'm good. I have a clear path moving forward. That usually doesn't happen. It's usually more like a slow, gradual process that occurs. And, at some point then when the grief is fully resolved, that identity begins to get more fully reconstructed and your future direction starts to become more clear. But again, this is a process that is going to be unfolding over time in its own way and at its own pace. And it's not, a failure if you can't do it, and get all this stuff figured out within like a month or something, or a couple of weeks of you not being a caregiver anymore. Just know these things can take months. For some people, it can take a year or so to really kind of get some of these different pieces tried out. See, again, just try different activities, see what they like, see what they don't like. And, like you the thought process of you got to try on some different kind of shoes, right? Before you figure out like what shoe's comfy, what shoe fits, and what shoes you like anymore. And, and that's kind of what we're doing. Think about, we're going to be taking some shoes out of the closet. We're going to be trying them on. We're going to be taking out some hobbies, and some things that we used to enjoy in the past. We're going to be taking those things out. We're going to be trying them on. We're just going to be trying out some different stuff and see what feels good, what we like, what brings us joy, what brings us peace, what resonates, what things we want to keep, what shoes we need to get rid of. No, I'm just kidding. What activities, what things that don't align anymore that we, don't really want in our lives, and move forward with those meaningful ones, that do resonate with us to help us really get our identity restored. And, again, that's the nature of meaningful human transitions. Like it takes time and it will unfold at its own pace for everyone. And that's different for everyone. So, what I want you to hold onto is this. On the other side of this disorientation that you can be absolutely feeling, and of the grief in the emptiness, and also this uncertainty, is there something real waiting for you? Your true sense of self is still absolutely there. There's a whole entire life that still has so many chapters to be written in your story. So interests, relationships, contributions that you still have, that you still want to make, and joys that you still are excited to experience in your own life are still possible. And perhaps in some ways more possible even now than they have been in a very long time. So, and again, like an anonymous caregiver quoted on our earlier slide described, the journey of rediscovering themselves as the hardest and most important part of the journey I've ever taken is this. And, I want to just honor both parts of that description. It is hard and it is genuinely, legitimately necessary, but it's also important, and perhaps one of the most important things you can ever do for yourself is piecing all of these things back together and refiguring out who you are now at the other side of this caregiving journey. And again, I just really welcome all of you to definitely please share in the comments if you have navigated through this and kind of what you experienced, what maybe surprised you that you didn't realize that you had kind of put on the back burner for yourself, caregiving, for someone else. And, what you did to kind of help you navigate through it, or maybe, share like a hobby or something that you started doing that you added to your schedule that you were surprised by, or that you just really enjoyed, or you realized like, wow, yeah, I used to do this a long time ago. And I actually have so much joy and so much meaning when I started doing this activity again. So please, 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 like I said, share that so we can kind of help give the community different ideas, to all, keep you all supported. So thank you guys so much. And again, for so long, to someone who's needed you, now you have the ability to create your whole entire own life, and now it's time to give some of that care back to yourself that you have given so much to others. So, as always, definitely please, please, please take care of yourselves. Like I said, start with just a regular kind of schedule routine and add some, shoes that we want to try on. Oh, just kidding. No, add some different kinds of activities and some kind of hobbies and just different things that you want to try to your schedule and just try them out. And, just start there, navigating kind of some of these puzzle pieces to start creating your new identity. So thank you guys for being here, and take care of yourselves and also each other. Thank you.